When you can do so many things, we can just do, but not necessarily be doing what God wants us to do in that season.
Hey, I'm so excited today. I have a special guest. She is my sister from another mister, and I'm so happy that she's here with us today. Hey, Bertina.
Hi, Chanté. How are you?
Great. I'm so happy to finally get together. I know we've talked about this for a long, long time, but I'm so happy that we finally found time to have this discussion that everybody's waiting to hear. To start off, I just want you to introduce yourself for all the people who may not know the infamous Bertina. Let them know a little bit more about you.
Well, my name is Bertina Foster. I am a real estate agent in Alabama, and I am also a certified life coach, specializing in relationships and personal growth. So, yeah,
She's also a mom and a
definitely.
wife and
Yeah.
active in her church, and she's doing all the other great things that comes with being a called woman of God. So we're grateful for all the things you do, Bertina.
Many, many hats of being a woman.
You mix them up, don't know which hat to wear sometimes, but yes,
Sometimes you got on all of them.
I know.
Just all of them.
All of them, that's true. Sometimes they tip into the one is falling off, trying to hold them together.
Yeah.
But yeah, but thinking about all the hats we wear, we've had a conversation recently, and I thought that it was so good that I wanted to invite you here to just let other women know. Really, we're starting this conversation with real women so that way we can express some of the things we kind of go through from day to day as women, as we're navigating life and relationships and family, navigating career, all the things, and navigating our faith. So I thought this would be a good time for us to kind of bring up that conversation again. And the conversation really is talking about, what do you do when you're gifted in many ways? So sometimes we're just grateful that God has blessed us with one special gift. But oftentimes he's given us a bunch of gifts, and that adds to the many hats that we wear. So I would want us to talk a little bit about that. Like, what do you do when you have all of these different types of gifts that God has given you, and trying to focus in on where he's calling you in a particular time or season? Because sometimes I feel like people have a hard time navigating that. So
Mhm.
yeah, tell us a little more about how you're doing that.
Whew. Well, it can be really difficult, honestly. Sometimes when we're operating in a gift or in a certain way, it's hard to necessarily do the transitions or the shifting.
Mhm.
So for me, what's required or something that helps me is more being quiet and still with God. I will do a lot of journaling, and just start trying to stop and focus in on God, because the busier we get, the more people and things pull on us. And it's easy to just get caught up in the ebbs and flow of life versus what God is really saying. And like you said, when you can do so many things, we can just do, but not necessarily be doing what God wants us to do in that season. So for me, I do like to journal and then go back to see different things or go back to read my journals to see, did I miss something? Just to kind of see, like, where should I be? And then just, being quiet and focusing in on God. And as as simple as that can sound, sometimes that can be hard, like just to really be silent for 2 or 3 minutes. You can set your timer for 3 minutes, and when you're just quiet, not looking at your phone, you'll be like, goodness, how long is 3 minutes? How long is
Exactly, exactly.
3 minutes? But so just being quiet and listening to him. We do a lot of praying, we do a lot of talking, but just sitting and waiting on his responses have been good for me.
Yeah, can you give us an example, maybe like something more specific about a time when you were kind of navigating that, feeling like you were called in many directions and trying to figure out what God was saying in that quiet time?
I would say, like, even in coaching for me, being able to coach, I can pretty much coach in any area. So it's like, you can coach people with setting goals. You can just coach them with wherever they are in life. But then, for me, it's like, but what am I supposed to do? What's going to be my highest and best use? So whereas when I first got certified, I'm sitting like, okay, well, do I one-on-one coach? Do I group coach? Do I coach women? Do I coach men? Is it relationships? Is it personal development? Like where is it out of the different areas? And so for me, the ability does not always mean that's where we're supposed to be.
Mhm.
Um, and so it takes trusting God, because when we can do so much, sometimes we trust in ourselves. So we just try to do all that we can do.
Mhm.
But to cut something off requires you to be able to trust that, okay, I can cut this off and be okay. But then also trust that you hear God pulling you in a certain direction. So for me, like it took a while. It took me, trial and error, going back and forth, sitting before God, talking things out. I process out loud. So for me, I need somebody to kind of talk to or bounce things off of, or I can journal. Those two ways help me when I'm processing. But
Mhm.
it takes a lot of conversations. It takes, like, well, hey, wait a minute, me asking or answering certain questions, and even the hard questions that we don't necessarily want to ask ourselves. Sometimes it's easier to ask others than it is ourselves. So for me, just really going through and seeing what is it that I like to do, what is it that I feel like God wants me to do, and what keeps being presented to me. So as I'm looking at all of these different things and just kind of putting them all together, because sometimes I want to do what I want to do. And
Oh, we all know. Yeah.
and it's like sometimes, God, He keeps giving you opportunities somewhere else, but you're like, yeah, I don't want to do that. So it just takes the humility to stop listening to God, and then the trust to know that He knows better than I do.
Yeah. No, that's good. You said ability doesn't mean that's where we're supposed to be. So I think that that phrase is actually really, really good because I think a lot of people are having difficulty figuring out one purpose, right? And we've talked a lot about that. We even had the conference where we talked about finding purpose and figuring out kind of God's call on our lives. So I feel like for a lot of people, they're struggling with that idea of like, well, I'm good at this, and it comes naturally to me to do this, but God is calling me to do that, which I may not feel as comfortable navigating or doing. So when you were saying, ability doesn't mean it's necessarily where you're supposed to be, how do you help people get clarity or understanding on deciphering the two? Because it gets blurry, honestly, sometimes. And some
Mhm.
parts is like like you were mentioning, like our own will, like, oh, this is easy. I'm good at this. I'm conversational. I would want to talk to people. But then God is telling you to be quiet, or He's telling you to, do something out of your comfort zone. So, how do you help people navigate those types of situations?
Well, honestly, first and foremost, it's it's going to boil down to the person. They have to be open, willing to get the help. Because as you know, like being a doctor, just because somebody comes in, just because they're having issues or they want something, does not mean that they're going to be compliant.
Yeah.
So you can tell
Tell
the
me
two of
about it.
them all
That's a
day.
whole other conversation, but yes.
Right. So the first part is really all on the person. But when someone is ready and they're trying to figure out, like, hey, what is my purpose? It starts with them being totally honest. It starts with someone being ready to be honest with themselves. And that part can be tricky because sometimes we carry what somebody else has told us. We carry other things around, not necessarily just all what we want. So
Mhm.
when you start with the simple question of what do you want, sometimes it takes a while for us to chisel and dig into really what is it that you want.
Mhm.
We can start with what our parents want for us, all these other things. But once we get to the essence of what we want, that's really our starting place.
Yeah.
It's what we want and what do we feel God wants for us. So as we begin to really answer those two questions, that's going to give us a starting point and we just work from there.
Yeah. And it's so hard sometimes. I even think for myself, it's like, oh, I want this. My list is extensive. It has a lot of detail. And then God will be like, no, but do this. But Lord, I really wanted this, a little icing on the top, add a cherry, put all that stuff in there. But he's like, no, just be simple. You just need to do this one thing. And I find like sometimes when we're trying to figure things out as far as like what God told us, it could be hard at the beginning. Sometimes it's fear of the unknown. Sometimes it's this idea of self-preservation, like we're trying to hold on to ourselves because maybe we've been hurt before or we trusted people before and it didn't work the way that we thought. But for a lot of it is like once we really recognize he's trustworthy and we step into what he's telling us, then it gets a little easier. So do you find that to also be true for you, that it's gotten easier over time to really listen in and hear what he's saying?
Yes, yes. It's like the more that you practice, the easier it gets.
Mhm.
So there's practice hearing God, like listening to Him, and then there's practice obeying Him. So if you're only doing one, if you're only hearing, then you will learn to hear God, but things will start getting cloudy when you don't obey God.
Mhm.
Like you won't be able to hear as clear when you're not obeying Him as well. So they kind of run together. But it does get easier the more that you do it, the more that you lean into Him. It's like you're able to see Him and trust Him, and it solidifies that yes, this is God that's speaking to me. So whereas at first you're like, don't really know. But the more that you actually do and obey, the more you're like, yeah, that
Mhm.
was definitely God. And most of the time it goes against what I would think anyway. So he always is going to take you out of your comfort zone. It's not going to be what you would think the way to do it is,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even if he's giving you what you want, it's like the way that he tells you to go about to get it just sounds like this could not be what you really want me to do.
Exactly. Exactly what you're saying. It's like faith is, for a lot of people, we think faith is listening to God, as you mentioned, like hearing him. But actually, faith is an action word. It's actually taking the steps and doing or obeying, as you mentioned. And I feel like you're right. People will separate the two things and feel like, I have a good prayer life. I'm doing all the things. I may be going to church. I'm praying with my family. I'm doing the things. But am I actually taking the step of faith? Am I taking action steps even when I don't see clearly the next thing ahead of me? And am I actively doing the last thing that God said? Because sometimes we feel like, oh, we can't move forward because we don't hear God telling us anything new. It's because, did you go back and check the old thing he said? Did you do the last thing that he said? So I think sometimes that can be a struggle as well for people trying to navigate that. And earlier when we were talking, you had mentioned just this idea of really taking time out, quiet time, having rest. What does that look like for a busy realtor who's selling all these houses, being a life coach and inspiring people? Like, what does rest look like for you? How do you actually incorporate that in your day?
I'm still working on that.
Yes, aren't we all?
For me though, like one, I seek to really focus in on trying to take care of myself first. So the things that I do before I start my day, just trying to keep those things in play because it's hard, and especially like being a mom, being a wife, you are here, you're like, I gotta take care of the husband, I gotta take care of the kids, I gotta take care of the house. You have all of these um, responsibilities. I can get to a place where it's about what all I can give to everyone. But then if I don't have anything to give to myself, then eventually I'm going to run empty. It might not be today, it might not be tomorrow. So I seek to make sure that I'm reading, replenishing, spending time with God, um, exercising, like drinking the water, eating the fruits and vegetables.
Yes.
It's like all of those things. But then on the weekends, especially like Sundays, I try to make sure, that's like more of my sleep in day. I sleep a little bit later on Sundays. I go to church and I have a very light load on Sundays. I don't really do a whole lot. So I try to rest on that day because with my schedule, it's kind of sporadic. I'm showing on this day or that day, it just depends with
Mhm.
clients. So I'm kind of all over the place. But on Sundays, I like to stay at home for the most part, reset,
Mhm.
and try my best to do nothing. Just try my best to not do anything. So I turn a blind eye to, laundry or whatever on Sundays. It's like I don't see you. So I don't see the dishes. I don't see the laundry. I just see the couch, so
I need to tell dishes and laundry that I don't see you. I don't see you.
right. I do not see you today, you know. And I'm just trying to focus in, every now and then they speak loud and they're like, I know you see me.
I know you see me.
But for the most part, I'm like, I'm ignoring you.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, no, that's great. I think it really honestly goes so much against what culture teaches, right? Culture teaches, especially as like women who are entrepreneurs or career driven women who also have children and families. I feel like the world teaches us this concept of like grinding, you work till you die, you need to work every day, but it's really not realistic. It's also not how our body was made to function. Like rest is an important part of our health. It's an important part for our body to heal and all the processes that goes with that. So I think it's so important to really teach women and let women know it is okay to do nothing. It took me a long time to be okay with like having a day where I do nothing, but having that Sabbath day is just so, so important. So I'm so happy that you don't see the dishes, you don't hear them calling you or anything on once, at least once a week. And I think that is just so important. Yeah,
yeah.
this has been great, Bertina. I am so happy we finally got a chance to have this
I
discussion, to
know.
hear all of your life coaching tidbits. But can you let us know how people can get in touch with you, find you, what's your social media handles, all of those things so we can know how they can get in contact with you?
So I am on Facebook and Instagram. I am Bertina D. Real Foster. And also my real estate website is calerarealtor.com or bertinafoster.exp.com.
Great.
So each one of those you can find me.
Awesome. So I'll link all of those down so people can find you, hear more about what you're doing, follow you, and just continue to be blessed and inspired. So thank you so much. I'm happy. This is a long time that we've been waiting to
I
do this,
know.
but I think so many people will be blessed by this conversation. So thanks so much. See you
All
next
right.
time.